My name is Mario Recker. I'm a computational biologist at the University of Exeter in the UK.
Hello, my name is Marta Montserrat, and I'm a tenor scientist in a research center that is named Institute for Mediterranean and Subtropical Horticulture La Mayora, that belongs to the Spanish National Research Council, and it is located in Algarrobo Costa in the province of Malaga, Spain.
In my research, I use mathematical models and computer simulations to understand the evolution, spread, and ultimately the control of insect pests.
In our world, we can see ecosystems of very different richness in terms of number and abundance of species that inhabit them. We see poor ecosystems in landscapes such as deserts, richer ecosystems in landscapes such as meadows or grasslands, or very rich ecosystems in landscapes such as rainforests or jungles. What ultimately defines the richness of an ecosystem is the so-called carrying capacity. That is what is represented in this simulation. As shown in the slide, there seems to be a positive relationship between an ecosystem's carrying capacity and a species' richness that we would expect to find in it. In fact, this would suggest that in a world that is inhabited only with primary producers, such as plants, the models would tell us that the abundance of plants increases linearly as ecosystem richness increases.
However, we all know that plants are consumed by other organisms that we call herbivores, or primary consumers. What theoretical models tell us is that from a certain level of richness, or plant abundance, herbivores start to invade and forage on plants. And as they start to reproduce, their population size increases in line with the richness of the ecosystem. This, however, comes at the cost of the plants, keeping their abundance low despite increasing levels of ecosystem richness. Therefore, if we would stop here, our world would not be that green. This scenario is illustrated here, where an ecosystem with high plant abundance gets invaded by a herbivore, whose expansion will cause dramatic decline in the density of these primary producers, leading to a much poorer ecosystem.
But again, we all know that herbivores are also consumed by other organisms that we call carnivores or secondary consumers. We can again refer to theoretical models which will tell us that from a level of richness on in which carnivores can invade, forage on herbivores and reproduce, they will do so, and their population will increase linearly as richness increases. This, however, will come at the cost of reducing the abundance of herbivores. And as the number of herbivores decline, there will be an increase in the abundance of plants. This phenomenon, where one trophic level can affect two trophic levels below, is commonly referred to a trophic cascade.
These trophic cascades are what allow landscapes as green and rich as rainforests and jungles to evolve. The simulation shows a trophic cascade in action. In this case, we start with a landscape where plant abundance is being kept low by the presence of herbivores. But as carnivores start to invade and populate the ecosystem, the number of herbivores drastically decline, which helps plants to recover and leads to an increase in ecosystem richness.
The mechanism that we have just introduced is called top-down control. Here, secondary consumers will keep primary consumers at bay, allowing primary producers to become abundant again. And this phenomenon, top-down control, is the one that we aim to exploit in this project. That is, by resolving to an ecological concept that underlie our natural world, our aim is to control pest species and maintain green, healthy, and productive crops by using natural enemies, such as predators or parasitoids, instead of harmful pesticides.
However, plants are not just passive actors in this story. For example, some plant species have trichomes that can increase the motility and decrease the foraging efficiency in both carnivores and herbivores. Or they synthesize phototoxins that affect herbivores negatively through ingestion, but that can also affect carnivores negatively through the ingestion of poisoned herbivores. And all these interactions ultimately determine the dynamics and abundances of all our main players in this plant-herbivore-carnivore ecosystem.
Take, for example, the case where plants produce trichomes or phytotoxins, which will have a negative effect on the predators, either by increasing the mortality of the predator or by decreasing the efficiency by which predators feed on herbivores. We would predict that this would lead to an increase in the number of herbivores and therefore an increase in crop damage.
We can use a mathematical model to investigate this scenario. In this case, we simulate what happens if the plants would evolve higher productions of trichomes or phytotoxins. As expected, its negative effect on predation rates on herbivores will favor the expansion of herbivores, leading to a decline in plant abundance or crop yield. We could also consider the case where trichomes or phytotoxins produced by the plants have a negative effect on the herbivores, for example by increasing their mortality, or by making them more vulnerable to predation by natural enemies. Either case would strengthen the trophic cascade and reduce herbivory, and ultimately increase the production of crops. We can again describe this mathematically and simulate the scenario where plants increase their defenses, which have a negative effect on the herbivores. As can be seen, with a decrease in herbivore numbers, plant crops start to recover and increase in abundance. What is also interesting to observe here is a secondary effect on the carnivores, which are not directly affected by the plant defenses, but are negatively affected by decreasing numbers of their prey.
The messages to take home are that we have seen that gathering knowledge of how species interact with each other from a tree trophic perspective
and using mathematical models to simulate how these interactions affect the dynamics of the whole community is paramount for the design of strategies to help maintain crop products by means of sustainable and environmentally friendly practices.